In this video, we are going to go through some of the best climbers of all time. Riders with immense power to weight ratios who specialise in soaring up mountains at breathtaking speeds. We have endeavoured to come up with a list of the 7 greatest climbers of all time. But as you can well imagine, it's quite difficult to whittle it down to that number. So before we start, I've got a disclaimer, which I'm going to read out right now. For a start, there have been over 100 years of fantastic racing and exceptional feats of endurance and athletic panache. To limit ourselves to 7 riders will inevitably leave some great riders out. Furthermore, cross-generational comparisons are a minefield. It's impossible to know how Chris would fare against Eddie Merckx or if Pantani would put away Copy. Equipment's changed, the racing's changed, the roads have changed, and the surfaces are often much better now than the gravel tracks of the 1920s. Also, for a large portion of sports history, there was no drugs testing. Right, with the disclaimer done, we shall begin. Number 1 on our list is Marco Pantani, one of the most extraordinary climbers of his generation. Now, Italians have a word for climber, and that is scalatore. But they have a different term for climbers like Pantani, which is scatista. This is a term given to climbers who are able to repeatedly accelerate even on the steepest slopes and basically decimate their rivals. Now, Pantani was always instantly recognisable with the bald head or the bandana, the earring in one ear and that goatee beard. And it was a look which earned him the nickname Il Pirata, or the Pirate. He was also very recognisable for his climbing style, almost always out of the saddle and in the drops. However, it wasn't his look or his climbing style which made him great, it was the fact that he could go up mountains like something off a shovel. And it was this ability which enabled him to achieve that rare feat of winning the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia in the very same year, back in 1998. The following year, in 1999, he was again dominating the Giro d'Italia. He won 4 stages and he was in the race lead. But then, after a blood doping control return, his hematocrit was too high and he was ejected from the race. Pantani was never quite the same rider again, and very sadly, he died in 2004 of acute cocaine poisoning. In the modern era, it is Chris Froome who's been dominating the Grand Tours. So far, he's won the Tour de France 4 times, he won the Giro d'Italia in 2018, and he won the Vuelta a España, well now twice, in fact. As soon as the road starts to go uphill, Chris Froome seems to be at an advantage. It was in Kenya where Froome first learnt about his climbing talent. It's said that he spent lots of time in the Nairobi mountains, and on occasion he used to camp up there too. But his commitment and stubbornness wasn't just evident on the bike, but also off it. Apparently, at one point, he used the Kenyan Cycling Association's Hotmail account to email the sports governing body, the UCI, to inform them that Kenya would be sending an under-23 team to the World Championships. Now, I think I'm safe in saying that Froome's climbing style is not particularly elegant, with his head down and his elbows out, but it sure is effective. That first came to prominence at the Vuelta a España in 2011, where he initially finished second, but then he's recently been promoted to the winner of that race. The following year, he helped Bradley Wiggins to the Tour de France title in 2012, bagging himself second in the process. But it was in 2013 that he really made a name for himself. He just couldn't stop winning. From the start of the year at the Tour of Oman, he also had the Criterium International, the Tour de Romandie, the Criterium de Dauphiné, and of course the Tour de France. And in fact, if you take Lance Armstrong out of the equation, he became the first rider the following year to successfully defend his title since Miguel Indurain back in 1995. Since then, he's gone on to win a further 2 Tours of France. And last year, he became the first rider to hold all 3 of the Grand Tour titles at the same time since Bernardino in 1983. Couldn't possibly have a list of the world's greatest climbers without including this man, Federico Montes. He became the first rider in history to achieve the career triple, in that he won the King of the Mountains competition at all 3 of the Grand Tours. He won the Tour de France in 1959, of course winning the King of the Mountains in the process, and actually he won the overall prize of King of the Mountains no fewer than 6 times at the Tour de France alone. He had a nickname, and that was the Eagle of Toledo. Toledo being the small province in central Spain where he comes from, and an eagle because every time the road went uphill, he would take flight, like an eagle. There is also a monument of Bahamontes in Toledo, donated by the Fundación Cyclists, to represent and honour everything that he achieved on the bike. And rather fittingly, it's on an upward slope, so he's still going uphill to this very day. What an absolute climbing legend. Only 2 riders in the history of cycling have won the King of the Mountains classification at all 3 of the Grand Tours, so it would make a lot of sense to have them both in here. Step forward, Lucho Herrera. he could outclimb some of the greats of the time, including the likes of Sean Kelly, Bernardino and Laurent Fignon. And in 1984, he took what was almost undoubtedly the most important win for Colombian cycling. It was his first ever Tour de France, it was stage 17, and it finished up Alpe d'Huez, which is where he attacked, dropping some of the greats of the time, Fignon, Hinault and also Robert Miller, and basically they never ever saw him again. However, it was in 1987 that he firmly cemented his status as legendary climber in becoming the first South American to win a Grand Tour, that Grand Tour being the Vuelta, despite having lost 3 minutes to Sean Kelly in an individual time trial. However, as soon as the road tilted upwards, he would never look back, attacking his rivals at almost every single opportunity, including in fact on stage 11, which finished up Lagos de Covadonga. There he attacked his rivals again, won the stage, and also took enough time on them to become the first Colombian rider to go into the lead of a Grand Tour. Really difficult actually to overstate just how important Herrera has been for Colombian cycling, and in essence, the current crop of Colombian climbing talent are walking the path that he trod for them back in the 1980s. This man could make a good case for being the best Spanish cyclist of all time, but it's not for his victories at the Tour de France in 1973 or at the Vuelta in 1970 that Ocaña makes our list. Rather, for his exploits when he attacked with Jose Manuel Fuente over the Col de Galibier and Col de Telegraph, putting 7 minutes into their closest rivals. Although, for me, it was 1971 where he cemented his status as climbing legend. It was a race actually where he ended up having to pull out whilst in the yellow jersey, but his exploits really began on stage 8, which finished up the Puy de Dôme. There he sent something that most other riders rarely ever got to see, that Eddie Merckx was vulnerable. He attacked and went on to win the stage, and although he only put 15 seconds into Merckx, that was basically a sign of things to come. It was on stage 11 though where he really showed his class. A short 134km mountain stage. He followed an attack on the very first climb of the day by Joaquin Agostino. Amazingly, they were able to drop Eddie Merckx almost immediately. But Ocaña was not satisfied with just doing that. He attacked again and went solo 60km from the finish. By the time he got to the top of the penultimate climb of the day, his lead over the next rider on the road was 4 minutes, and that had grown to 6 by the time they got to the finish. 3-time Tour de France winner Nilsson claimed that his exploits on that stage were just as good as any of Fausto Coppi's legendary solo raids. Now that is a decent climber. In my opinion, any rider that earns the nickname the Angel of the Mountains thoroughly deserves a place on this list. Charlie Ghul was a cyclist from Luxembourg who first raced in the mountains in 1950 at the Tour of Austria. He was only 17, but he won a stage up the Großglockner Pass. It's fair to say though that his first few outings at the Tour de France didn't really go to plan. He abandoned most of them, but it was in 1955 where he really set the cat amongst the pigeons. He wasn't great on the flat, that was partly down to a fairly weak team, but once he hit the mountains and the Alps, he really came into his own. There was one stage which went over the Galibier and the Col du Telegraph, and there he put 14 minutes and 47 seconds into all his rivals. That launched him from 37th on GC right up to 3rd. And when the race hit the Pyrenees, he started attacking again, winning stage 17 ahead of eventual overall race winner Lucho Herrera. Those exploits earned him the overall in the King of the Mountains competition and the 3rd step of the podium. And really that was just one example of how when he hit the mountains, Charlie Ghul would make a big comeback. He also, in 1958, set the record for the ascent of Mont Ventoux, 1 hour, 2 minutes and 9 seconds. And when you consider that the surface wasn't great at the time, it's pretty incredible to think it was 31 years until Jonathan Vaughters broke that time. And finally, we have a rider who won the mountains classification 3 times at the Giro Rosa and also won the Grand Boucle and is easily the fastest GCN presenter ever. Of course, I am talking about Emma Puli. Now, one of her most impressive climbing exploits came back at the 2014 Giro Rosa. There were 3 mountainous stages that year, including back-to-back summit finishes on stages 8 and 9, and Emma won all of them. She's also twice won the Taiwan KOM Challenge, which finishes at 3,275 metres above sea level on the Huilung Pass. And in 2017, in fact, she put 16 minutes into her closest rival, and 20 minutes into Cy Richardson as well, although that doesn't necessarily make you a fantastic climber. Not content though with just being a great climber on the bike, she's also pretty damn good off the bike as well. She regularly competes in mountainous triathlons and has won the Alpe d'Huez long course event in the past, and also competes in mountainous running events. Now, as we said in the disclaimer at the start of this video, it's very hard to compile a list of the 7 best climbers of all time. I'm sure we've left some of your favourites out, and if we have, feel free to let us know in the comment section below. It's just very difficult to compare riders from different eras. That said, with GPS data now, in 50 years' time, we probably can compare all the riders for the next 50 years, which would be nice. Right, if you like the style of this Spanish-inspired sweatshirt that I'm wearing right now, you can pre-order them now over at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. There's a link to that in the description just below this video. And if you would like to learn how to become a much better climber yourself, you can learn from Emma Puli. Her video is just down here.